oh hey guys, this was supposed to be recorded 2 weeks ago ish, right? But then 2 weeks ago, I went fishing and I caught like fish aids or whatever. And for the past week and a half, I've just been coughing everywhere, which is why I couldn't record because every time I try to talk, I would start coughing and I would mess up the shot. I still am. It's just a bit less bad now. Less worse. Whatever. So yeah, I've been meaning to do a review of the Ise-class battleship carrier hybrid, which I really like because the way it looks is fucking amazing. It even tops the E400 class in terms of its sheer cool factor. But from a military standpoint, it was pretty much a fucking clusterfuck. That's a bad thing. I mean, because yeah, the idea of having an aircraft carrier with its own anti-aircraft escort, or anti-ship escort, or having a battleship with its own like air cover complement is great. But then when you try to apply that in real life, it doesn't always work out. Mostly the fact that you have a battleship which can only carry 22 aircraft, right? Of which 8 are seaplanes, and the other 14 are actually not fighters, but dive bombers. And that's GG, because first of all, the flight deck is 70 meters long, right? That's about 1/3 of a normal carrier, and what that means is that, holy shit, you can't land anything on a 70-meter flight deck. You can take off things, you can take things off, but only with a catapult, which they had, right? But then once they launch, the only way to recover them is to either land them on a friendly carrier, on an air base, or to ditch the plane in the ocean and then recover the crew. Which, I mean, yeah, the crew lives, but then the fucking plane is in the water, which means it doesn't work anymore. So for long campaigns, no, it doesn't work out. You can only send one wave, because then they're in the fucking ocean. There's salt water in the engines. It's all fucked up. You can't use it. It's useless. They're useless. And as for the seaplanes, they have these giant things called pontoons on the bottom of the fuselage, which means, oh cool, they can land in the water and still take off. But then, holy shit, they're useless. They're pretty much useless in combat because of these giant, not aerodynamic things on the bottom of the plane that really hinders performance and maneuverability, and they're giant targets for pilots to aim at. If they get taken out, the entire aerodynamic balance of the thing gets thrown off, and you crash. Another problem was that when you look at the design a bit more carefully, and by that I mean if you just take a passing glance at it, you'll see that the number 4 turret is pointing toward the goddamn hangar in a default state, which is almost as bad as the Tatao class, which had the number 3 turret pointing toward the goddamn superstructure, right? But it's an even bigger problem here because when you try to fire the 3rd and 4th turrets, their fire nodes are a bit limited because if you fire them the wrong time at the wrong place, then what you have is the shockwave completely fucks up the flight deck, and you can knock off one of your own planes off the flight deck that it's supposed to take off of, because the shockwave from the explosion is that powerful and that close to the conning tower and the planes. And to pair them together would make 44 additional planes for any possible strike force that the IJN could have put together as part of a carrier group, right? Which isn't that bad. 44 planes, that's like half a decent carrier, but more than, say, an Independence class or Casablanca class escort or light carrier, which makes it something of an asset, If it weren't for the fact that their maximum speed is like 10 knots below the rest of the carrier fleet, but that's fine because most escort carriers were slower than fleet carriers. Sometimes because they had destroyer tier machinery, and sometimes because they were converted off of ocean liners or troop ships. But whatever the reason, light carriers weren't held to the same standard as fleet carriers. So in that aspect, I guess they're okay. But it's still a problem when you have a carrier where you can't recover the aircraft. I mean, that's a big fucking flaw for anything, really. I mean, that's like having a battleship, right? But then when you fire the guns, like the guns blow up as well. So you can only fire one salvo before you have to go home and replace the entire turret. It's not like that, but a bit less bad. My analogy there was kind of shit, but whatever. but the concept I still really like, and the design as well. Just that militarily and like in terms of actual practicality, it was really limited. And I think that what they should have done is replace the 14 dive bombers with maybe 16 or so zeros, because one, zeros are lighter, and also they don't have a giant half-ton bomb strapped to the bottom of the fuselage. On a 70-meter flight deck, everything counts. I'm pretty sure there was at least one guy whose aircraft was too heavy and he wasn't good enough, and he ended up just fucking ramming his plane into the ocean. Feel sorry for that guy. But like, if they had replaced the 14 Suises or Judies or D4Y dive bombers with 16, let's say 16 zeros, and you still had the 8 seaplanes each, you could have had a nice what is that? Base edition. 24 planes per aircraft. Yeah, you could have had 24, right? 24 planes per ship, and you could have had the recoverable seaplanes flying as combat air patrol during any kind of combat with enemy ships. And then you could have had these the zeros on the deck ready to take off to intercept when needed. It's better than having the zeros up in the air, because one, the recon planes had better radios than the pretty much non-effectual. It's a word, right? Yeah, probably. Or ineffective radio sets that the zeros had, and also they can actually be recovered if they run out of fuel. The only problem with having the flight deck on the back of your ship is that when you're in a normal carrier, right, you steam toward the wind so that the wind is coming at you, right? And then when you take off in your plane, the way they take off is that the wind will catch in the wings, and you can take off with a shorter deck if you're flying into the wind. But you can't do that when the flight deck is on the back of your ship, unless you want to start steaming backwards, which overall is a pretty shit idea. And that's why they had catapults. But what I think would have been kind of cool is if the Ises had been used in that kind of way and had 16 zeros as air cover planes, whatever, along with their 8 seaplanes for spotting, reconnaissance, and patrols, and anti-submarine warfare. And they had been put in a center force and instead of the northern decoy force of the southern force. Because if center force actually had some air cover, Taffy Theory's jimmies would have been so fucking rustled that the vibrations from the rustling would have sent the entire fleet immediately. So one of the reasons, why they weren't as aggressive and successful as they should have been, as I explained before in my video about Samar, was because the planes of Taffy Theory were making dry runs, which is when you don't actually have any ordnance, right? But you still make an attack run toward the enemy ships. And the enemy ships don't know that you have no ordnance, right? So they still swerve to avoid you. And they also waste precious anti-aircraft fire, firing at planes that have no that really pose no threat, unless you're trying to strafe. But I mean, it's bullets against fucking battleship tier armor, so really, no threat. This was possible against Center Force because Center Force had fuck all in terms of air cover. It was all battleships and heavy cruisers and light cruisers and destroyers, and nothing with any substantial anti-aircraft capability. Which is why if the zeros were there, that's 16 plus 16. I mean, it's 32 zeros in the air, ish. Probably maybe 30 or 29 because of malfunction and stuff. And with the long range of the zeros on hand, they would have been able to stay in the air for a pretty long time, especially for the vital first hour, 2 hours of the fight. And so with actual aircraft in the air on the side of the Japanese, then the dry runs would have been a lot more dangerous. And obviously, more planes would have gone down, which means less of a threat to the center force, and therefore more aggressive action. And also the addition of, 8 barrels per ship probably would have been a nice addition, even though Yamato was pretty much the only ship making actual hits in terms of battleships that day. And they would have been completely wasted as part of the southern force anyway, because, it was at night, which means no planes, pretty much. and having a few extra hulls wouldn't have helped, considering that they got completely fucking ambushed and wrecked by a bunch of torpedo boats. And considering the state that they were in, which means no air crew, they probably were the most useful they could have been as part of the Northern Secret Force. Considering that from a great height, which I would think that the U.S. recon and scouting planes would have been at, they could have been mistaken as either a battleship or a carrier, because no one's gonna think that holy shit we should stick together two of the most conflicting types of ships into one monstrosity. They could have been alternatively reported as battleships or as carriers, and they're both really high value targets, so it probably made them a lot more enticing as bait in their what, contemporary or then current what's the word? Oh man, it's like configurations. That's the word. Yeah, like in the configurations that they were in at that time, they were the most useful as part of the Northern Force. But yeah, to sum things up, I think the concept was amazing. The design that it turned out in was even better, but the military usefulness and actual tactical value of the ship was about as much use as you would get out of a table with no legs, and then instead you have like gasoline soaked into the table, and it's made of wood, and you want to use it at a candlelit dinner, and then you accidentally knock over the candle, and the entire fucking table just goes up in flames. And it's all shit. People get burned. People die of smoke inhalation, and really no one has their time. That's the Ise-class in a nutshell. Of course, some of the reasons was because of the then state of the IJN Air Force and the lack of trained pilots and decent carrier-based aircraft for newbie pilots that could have been used to make up the complement of the Ise-class battleship carrier hybrids. That was a big problem too. But yeah, that's what I think of the Ise-class battleship carrier hybrids. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you guys later. Bye.